the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and after the Philadelphia Union's 4-1 victory over the Columbus Crew last Saturday, they head down south to face Inter Miami, and after that, we all know they have the CONCACAF Champions League game on Tuesday night against Alianza in El Salvador, which Jim Curtin said, look, our number one priority this week is going to be Miami. We're not focusing on the CONCACAF Champions League. 100% of the focus is on Miami, and that's what you want to hear from the coach, and that's exactly why we're here to talk about this upcoming Inter Miami versus Philadelphia Union game. And joining the podcast for the very first time is a longtime soccer reporter covering MLS and the founder and host of Miami Total Football, Franco Panizo. Franco, how are you doing?
I'm good, brother. Thanks for having me on. I know we had some technical difficulties to get this going, but we made it work in the end. So thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, it's I love the work that you're doing with Inter Miami, covering the team. And for people that aren't familiar with your work, before you started covering Inter Miami, you were covering the New York soccer market with Ives Galarcep. And I never got the chance to meet you when you guys would come down into the press box because I wasn't covering the team at the time. And hopefully that changes when Miami comes to Philadelphia this year. We'll see. But take me back before you started working with Ives and how you got into soccer.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a soccer guy. You know, football family since I was a kid. My family's Peruvian, so it's just been in the blood since I was a baby. And you know, as I got older and trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to do with my life and bounce around different majors, I was, you know what? I've always liked the journalistic aspect of sports. I always found myself, even when I was younger, I like the narratives and the stories. And anyway, long story short, I ended up making that my major. I reached out to Ives when he was working at ESPN at the time and just emailed him just to get some tips from a seasoned vet. And at that time, he was starting up Soccer by Ives, which is now SBI Soccer, as an independent website. And, he's like, send me a sample. I sent him a sample. And, I think his exact words were, you're as green as marijuana, but I'll work with you. And yeah, things just kind of snowballed from there. Ended up moving to the Northeast after I finished college, covered New York Red Bulls and New York City FC up close and personal, but also, like you referenced there, I've also covered the Philadelphia Union a good bit, especially in the early years when they had Freddie Adu, Amobi Okugo, Danny Cruz, that team. And covered DC United, some New England Revolution, made my way up to Canada a few times to see what was then the Montreal Impact, is now CF Montreal, Toronto FC, went a little bit west to go see the Columbus Crew. So, that little Northeast pocket is great in terms of having a lot of access to a lot of different teams. So that's pretty cool. But I'm happy to be back in South Florida, back home.
Yeah, and the warmer weather, right? I'm sure you were happy to get out of the cold because, yes. I'll tell you what, that game against Columbus on Saturday was so cold in the press box. It's an open-air press box for people that don't know, so you have the wind blowing off the river right at your face. The good thing is, you're covered on the side, but once you get those wind gusts coming straight at your face, there's nothing you can do. I mean, there's no heat, there's no AC, it's open air, like I said in that press box. But
you can go sneak to the media meal room and, where it's all closed, and you can just watch the game on TV.
For sure.
But at that point, you might as well just stay home and watch the game on TV, unless you really, really like the meals. I don't know if they still have the pretzels like they did back in the day.
They did.
Nice. Okay.
It's always a good motivator to go into the press box for those pretzels. But I know Kevin Kincaid, and he was joking where back in the day when you guys were covering the club in the early days, you mentioned Freddie Adu, Madragan, the goalkeeper, and all these former great Union players, maybe not so great, some of those players. Some really bad days for the Union in those early days. But the press box back in the day was packed. And when I talked to Kevin a few weeks ago, he's like, he can't figure it out. Why the press box, when this team is so hot, it's not as packed as it was when the Union were terrible. And I get it. Maybe part of it was the new kids on the block. But this is when everybody should be covering the team, when the last 5 seasons they have the most points in MLS. Like, where have all these people gone? And I get it. People change majors. People different life choices catch up. Yeah, you're right. It's MLS.
It's MLS, man. The shiny new toy. The shiny new toy is nice, and everyone likes the shiny new toy. Yep. But after that luster wears off, unless you're really sexy in terms of like the type of players you have, the way you're playing, winning, it's hard to maintain. There's I won't say anomalies, although I guess you could use the word anomaly. There's definitely exceptions to the rule, Atlanta, Seattle, but by and large, I mean, these teams struggle for press coverages. Just watch ESPN. Do you see MLS highlights there on a regular basis? No.
Yep, so. And then you look at what Vox did with all the SB Nation sites and everything, and that took a big dent in the coverage of MLS. And I've already talked about that on my podcast. We don't need to get onto that again. I mean, I feel so bad for all those SB Nation writers. I mean, they were the backbone of a lot of these MLS teams. But like I mentioned, you're the founder of the host of Miami Total Football. Talk to my listeners a little bit about that. How did you get the idea to start that podcast?
Yeah, so when I moved back down, I moved back in 2020, right before the pandemic, actually about a month before the pandemic, put a pause on everything. I was like, you know what, it's time. Spent 8 years in the Northeast, most of my 20s. I was like, it's time to go back. Let's cover the local team. There's now a team in South Florida. That's one of the reasons why I left. There was no soccer to cover here. So I was like, let me go back now. I wanted to spend time with friends and family as well after being gone for a while. So I moved back down. And when I moved back down, I mean, as you know, when I started, I was just a writer. I would just write. That was my goal. That was my objective. That was just what I did. Media has evolved immensely since just a decade ago. I mean, do people really read as much anymore as much as they used to? Probably not. So when I moved back down, the idea was I needed to become just more of a Swiss Army knife and be able to do a little bit of everything. So, I still enjoy writing and still do that. I've also put some energy into the podcast, which is, for audio, people listening on their commute to work, people going for a jog in the morning, whatever it is. So, I created the podcast. I also started a YouTube channel where I upload the interviews that we do with Inter Miami players and Inter Miami related content covering the team. So there's a visual aspect. If you're more of a visual person and you'd like to sit down and watch either on your PlayStation 5, your Xbox, whatever it is, or your computer, your laptop, whatever it is. So we have the YouTube page. We've got Facebook. We've got Instagram, because you have to have the social media incorporated as well. So just a little bit of everything, man. Just trying to be a Swiss Army knife, trying to expand my horizons and do a little bit of everything, because this day and age, just with the different way everybody consumes media, I think it's necessary.
I couldn't agree more with you. And it's crazy to me where, I'm not going to name some MLS clubs, but how they're cut off their connection with people that aren't your quote unquote traditional journalists. And it's like, what are you guys doing? Like you mentioned, are people really reading as much as they were 10, 12 years ago? Probably not. And big part of that is podcasts. And so seeing on Twitter some of these different journalists that say, they got their credentials taken away because they don't think a podcast is good enough. They want more written form. It's kind of mind blowing to me that teams would cut out such a huge market. But again, it's a conversation for another day. And speaking of media, I was told that Inter Miami hosted a soccer game for media members recently, and you were a part of that game.
Yes.
And I've heard the story that you got a red card in that game. How does one get a red card in a media soccer game?
It's nonsense. Well, the referee, just so you know, the head ref was the Inter Miami PR guy, who I've known for a long time. We've worked together not only in Inter Miami, but also when he was at Orlando City. So, we have a good working relationship. Now, at the end of the game, he gave me an unwarranted red card for no reason. I didn't say anything to him. I didn't act any type of way. I was literally walking off the field. I'm not going to say I was not disappointed. I was disappointed that my team lost. But I didn't mutter anything under my breath. I was literally walking towards Josef Martinez, who was my team's head coach, and I was going to just shake his hand and, all right, that's it. But then I heard my name, I turn around, and I'm given a red card. So it's just a referee trying to be the center of attention. You see that from time to time. Head ref wants to be center of attention. So that's how I got a red card. Completely unwarranted. I fully expect to appeal to whatever Inter Miami appeals committee there is for the next media game.
100%. And we're going to drop names. Was it Rafa?
It was Rafael Cabrera, Rafael Cabrera. Yes, it was Mr. Rafa himself.
That's my guy.
There's video of it. Actually, I tweeted out the video of him giving me the record. You can see it. I'm literally just walking, and then he you see me turn around and then I get a red card for it.
I'll put that video in the show notes for everybody that's listening to the podcast. If you guys want to check that out, I can't believe Rafa would do something like that. That's my guy. He's helping me out when I need help getting information on Inter Miami. So I respect him a lot. But it's come on, they give Franco a red card. Come on.
Hey, listen, I guess true to form, right? Because I am very opinionated. I am very vocal, and I do go studs up when it comes to the coverage of the team. I think when it's deserving, whether you agree or disagree. But maybe it's true to form. Maybe it was for something I wrote or something I said on the podcast at some point. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was instructed from above. No, but listen. In all seriousness, Inter Miami did a very good job with that media game. A few of us since 2020 have been asking for a media game. We kind of got a small sample at the end of last year with one that was put together, but it was more like a media practice with a little like short game afterwards. This one was, bells and whistles, everything you can imagine. And I'll give Rafael Cabrera and the rest of the communication staff, an immense hand because they pulled all the stuff. We got customized jerseys with numbers, hung in the locker room, professional photographer, take the team's professional photographer taking pictures of us before the game, in the locker room. And there's a picture they snapped to me as I'm tying my shoelaces, which I think came out really, really cool. They took video of us like talking to the coaches in the pregame locker room. We had pregame interviews. There was actual in-game commentary from Thomas Rongen. It was just really cool. It was really cool. I've been critical of them when they haven't done things right. And this is not necessarily a soccer specific thing. This is a media event that they put together, but they did very, very well. It was a lot of fun. So, kudos to them. Hopefully that's the sign of things to come. Yeah, fingers crossed. But no, they did very well with that. I mean, look, they had us warm up with one of the Inter Miami trainers. At halftime, they gave us the little juices that the players have when they're trying to, hydrate again in the middle of a game. And then post game, they gave us the protein shake or the shake that the players take for recovery afterwards. So they pulled out all the stops again, man. They gave us the full experience, and it was a lot of fun.
And you guys can never ask for any more. I mean, that's awesome. And you guys are the backbone, given the
stadium. In the stadium the week of the opener, which to get us on the field the week leading into the opener, which was at home for Inter Miami at DraftKings Stadium, that's
you guys opened up the season.
Exactly. But that's a tough ask, man. That's a tough ask. I don't know how they did it, but again, I give them a hand because job well done.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and switch focuses to that Inter Miami home opener against CF Montreal, which we know Miami won that game 2-0. Calendar a little bit shaky early on, playing out of the back, gives the ball away cheaply. He has to make a tough save, makes a save, keeps a clean sheet in the game. I think he had 6 saves on the night. Was it the best Miami performance? Probably not. But look, you guys have been good at home. 10 wins last season, and it continued against CF Montreal. It didn't have to be the prettiest. At the end of the day, they got the three points, and that's a perfect start for the Miami fans and for Phil Neville and that coaching staff. What are your takeaways from that game against Montreal, though?
Yeah, I agree with you that I didn't think it was Inter Miami's best performance. The first half was pretty even from the run of play, not much in it at all. Although Inter Miami took the lead late on off of a set piece, off a corner kick. Inter Miami did what they had to do. They hit in the moments that they needed to hit. They weren't overwhelmingly great in the attack, but in the moments that they could attack, they made the most of it. And that proved enough, combined with some solid defending and then some exceptional goalkeeping. Drake Callender for me, even though he didn't get the jersey or, whatever the team honor is during the game. I don't know who votes on that because the media doesn't, but, it went to Sergii Kryvstov, who scored the game winner, center back, made his debut. And he did have a good game, but Drake Callender was, for me, the best player on the day. He bailed Inter Miami out on a number of occasions. You mentioned 6 saves. I think 3 or 4 were very good saves. 1 or 2 that were top level. So, Drake Callender for me was pivotal to coming out with 3 points for Inter Miami. And again, crucial for Inter Miami. But they did what they had to do. And I'm sure we'll touch on this in more detail in a little bit. One of the things that was revealed before the game was that Leonardo Campana, the striker, the Ecuadorian striker, who was projected to be a starter, scored a bunch of goals last year. He missed this game due to an injury that he picked up a couple of days prior to that. So, not having him, that was a big loss, especially with Josef Martinez not being 100% ready in terms of fitness and game shape. So they did what they had to do. They got 3 points at home. They found a way to do it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day if it was pretty or not. They'll take it and they'll take the confidence from that and they'll move forward to this weekend against the Philadelphia Union.
Absolutely. And you mentioned calendar. Hey, look, he didn't get Miami's player of the game, but he did get team of the week, I guess we're calling now in MLS. And
team of the match day.
Team of the match. There we go. Right. Yeah, not team of the week anymore. Team of the match day. Like, come on, what are we doing? Like,
I guess it makes sense because sometimes, when you have those midweek games and stuff, then like it's team of the week, but then you have another team of the week, or like it gets all confusing. So team of the match day, I guess, makes more sense, but it is a little jarring after, being accustomed to team of the week. I get the sentiment, but I understand the rationale behind the decision.
Yeah, I do too, I guess. But come on, like we're accustomed to saying team of the week, and now we see the first post and it says team of the match week, and we're like, what? Like, come on. But yeah, calendar. I mean, good to see. I don't know who votes for them. I know North American Soccer Reporters, we get 2 votes, I think, 1 and 2. And for that's just overall player of the match week, not the every single player in the lineup. And so I was glad to see that whoever votes on that said that calendar deserved to be the goalkeeper. And like you mentioned, I mean, had 3 or 4 really good saves in that game against Montreal. But you were going to say?
When I covered the Red Bulls and I was like editing for MLS and I was freelancing for MLS, like a network of the MLS reporters plus like some freelancers would, we had to fill out a form during every game that we watched or that we edited or produced or whatever the phrase was. And you'd have to like suggest players that you thought were candidates for man of the match. And then I don't know who made the final call on that or what, but it was definitely like that. I don't know if it's still like that today. You're talking almost a decade ago that I was doing that. So, but I could imagine it's probably something similar where it's like, some MLS people come up with the team of the match day, just because it's practically impossible to watch every MLS game every weekend now, just because how many teams and games there are. So, I mean, it's practically impossible. I mean, I guess it's not impossible. You could do it, but you're essentially sitting there all day for a day and a half, probably. So, yeah, I'm sure there's some formula there. It's probably not a perfect formula, but hey, I think they got it right.
They did 100%. Got the right goalkeeper in there, and I think overall, I mean, the players they selected in the starting 11. No players I really disagree with there. So shout out to the people that voted for all that. But let's go.
They got it right for once. They got it right for once.
For once.
I don't know if they always get it right, but they got it right this time.
It's a good start.
You know why? Because it's week 1, so a lot of the eyes are tuned in 100%.
It's a new Apple deal. Everybody's tuning in. It's free preview, so we got to get this right.
Let's talk in week 12 when the eyes are glossed over because it's like 12 weeks of this, and then it's like summertime, and let's see in week 12 if they get the match day team right.
We're paying attention, MLS. But you mentioned Josef Martinez, and this was a big move for Miami for a couple of reasons. We all know he's a proven MLS player scoring over 90 goals with Atlanta United. And I know he hasn't been the same player since tearing his ACL back in 2020, but going to Miami, I think the big thing is he's not being asked to be the guy like he was in Atlanta. And so right there, that's a ton of pressure off his shoulders where he doesn't have to be the guy and carrying, I think we can all admit, bad Atlanta United teams the last couple seasons, where he goes into Miami where, okay, look, I'm not going to be focused on everything's not going to run through me like it was in Atlanta. He's not on a DP contract, which he was when he was with Atlanta. And that's fantastic for you guys. I think today, it was just announced that you guys did in fact fill all 3 DP spots. I know there was a little bit confusion around that. Do you guys have an open one? Do you guys not? And then it comes out, okay, yeah, all 3 spots are taken. But your thoughts on the move for Josef going to Miami?
I think, based on what they could work out, Atlanta's paying a fraction of his salary, and Miami's paying another part of it. And, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's a 1-year deal, so with options for more. So, based on what Inter Miami's looking to do, they're looking to score goals. They're looking to help make up for the loss of goals that they won't have with Higuain retiring. So, Campana can help fill that void, but he's injury prone, as the early years of his young career have shown. As much as there's been promise, there's also been a lot of injuries. Again, suffered one right here on the cusp of the start of the regular season. So Josef Martinez is another piece there who should add some goals. That's the idea, at least from Inter Miami. Now, we'll see. We'll see, because like you said, he has not been the same. There's definitely been a before and after in Josef Martinez's MLS tenure, and that's the injury, right? Like, he has not been the same player. The production hasn't been the same since that injury. You could say Atlanta United got worse as well during those years, and that obviously impacts a striker's production, but clearly physically isn't the same exact player. Now, how close can he get to that? If Inter Miami can get 60 to 70% of him back to that level, I think they'll take that, especially since they're looking to play with two strikers this year and try to play a 4-4-2 diamond, which Philadelphia Union fans might know a good thing about. But we'll see. We'll see, because there's questions about, at least for my part, about, you know, his fitness levels. How long will it take him to get to optimal condition? He's not there yet. It's not there yet. Week one, he couldn't play the 90 minutes. And I think he's a good ways away from really, really being 90 minutes fit and 90 minutes sharp. So, I say this now after he coached me in the game, so he didn't bench me. But no, I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, media game aside, all seriousness, I think there's work for him to do. If he can get fit, then we'll see how close he can get to returning to the old Josef that we know. Again, I don't know if he gets there, but again, if he can give you 60 to 70%, I think Inter Miami takes that, especially since they plan to play with two strikers. So, like you said, not everything runs through him. Not all the weight is on his shoulders to produce goals.
Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you 100%. Just in terms of he wasn't fit. I mean, I think that was obvious watching the game against Miami. Now, I guess you have a better view of it being in the stadium and watching it, and maybe we don't have the best view where the camera's not constantly watching Josef Martinez on the field. But it was a debut. I think that's all we can say. It was a debut. I think some people might not want to use it as an excuse, but I think not playing on turf will help Josef Martinez because we saw all those injuries that Atlanta United had last season. And I know people say, "Oh, it's not the turf and everything," but I don't know. I don't know where I stand on that. Is it the physio?
The turf definitely plays a part. The turf definitely plays a part. Like there's a reason why, if you could drop the ideal circumstances, soccer, football is played on grass.
And that's why FIFA wants all grass fields in America when the World Cup comes here in 2026.
And like athletes that are being honest, professional soccer players will tell you this. They'll say, look, the game, and you talk to especially South American players who don't play on turf fields, they'll tell you the sport is different when you play on a turf field because the ball bounces differently, it runs differently, it reacts differently. Like, yes, is it still 11 versus 11, 2 goals? Yeah, sure. But like the little details, maybe you can't appreciate on TV if you're watching from home or maybe even in the stands. Like these are things that do matter. These are things that do impact the run of play. So, I think not playing on turf helps him. Like it would probably help anybody. I mean, look, just sliding on turf, it can be the best turf. Even sliding on turf leaves you with a burn or some pellets on your leg. So it is what it is in MLS. You have turf fields. But if we lived in an ideal world and every MLS team could have grass fields, then absolutely, I think they all would.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And like I said, by the time the World Cup comes here in 2026, we know the teams that are still playing in NFL stadiums that have turf, they're going to have grass. So hopefully that helps improve the quality a little bit for MLS. But we mentioned Josef Martinez. He is one of many of new players for Miami, where they brought in, I believe, a total of 9 players this season. Some other notables are Nicolas, Stefanelli, Franco Negri, a defender from Argentina as well. Stefanelli is from Argentina. And then you mentioned Sergii Kryvstov, the defender who scored in his debut from Ukraine. What are your thoughts on these players that I just mentioned for the club? Do you think these are good pieces to just keep building what Phil Neville and the coaching staff built one last season, getting the club into playoffs, 48 points, 10 wins at home?
I do like these pieces that they've added. It's going to sound homer of me because I'm down here and covering the team, but I do like the pieces. I think I like those pieces more than I like Josef Martinez. I think that they have the ability to impact the season more, unless Josef gets back to close, like I said, to what he used to be. But based on what I've seen and what I think, look, Kryvstov is a Ukrainian center back who's played at a high level, played in Champions League games. He looks very polished. Looks like an upgrade over Damian Lowe, who's now a Philadelphia Union player. So Inter Miami, it's early days for Kryvstov, but so far, from what I see, very tactically astute player, positional plays, seems very solid, just solid. Haven't seen him make a mistake yet. I'm sure that will change over the course of a 34-game regular season, but seems like a very cerebral player and someone who tactically is very aware and positionally very aware of where he needs to be and what he needs to do. Franco Negri, a left back with a lot of attack to his game, and he's been given the freedom to get into the attack. He ripped one shot from outside the penalty area, low into the left that forced CF Montreal's goalkeeper into a save. So that's promising as well. And then Nicolas definitely has some promising technical abilities, his understanding of the game, his combinations. I don't know if he's being played in his best position. He's playing like as a de facto 10 of sorts, but he's not really a 10. He can play there. He can fill in there. He said he'll play anywhere. He's played on the wing. He's played all over in his career. I don't know if that's his position. I asked him during his introductory press conference, how to describe his playing style, because he had talked about how he played a bunch of positions. So I was like, all right, but how would you describe your playing style? And the way he described it, I won't go into the whole response, but he was saying, I like to make diagonal runs and behind. So if you're a 10, you're not really making diagonal runs and behind. That's something a forward does. So I don't know if the 10 is his best spot, but just because of his soccer IQ and his technical abilities, not the biggest guy, but I think he'll have some success in MLS, especially if they can find a position for him that plays more to his strengths, that plays to how he wants to play.
Yeah, for sure. And with those 9 players that they brought in, I know we didn't mention every single one of them. There was also 9 players that also left the club. And I think the biggest name on that list was for sure Alejandro Pozuelo, who I think there was reports out there that the club wanted to bring him back, but they couldn't agree to the contract terms, the amount of money they were going to pay him. Is that correct?
So it's complicated as things are in MLS, because they did want to bring him back. And no, they did not say this outright. You could read between the lines and you can understand. Rodolfo Pizzaro came back from his loan from Monterrey. This is his last year in his contract as a designated player with Inter Miami that he signed in 2020. They were trying to find someone to buy Pizzaro. They were trying to find a way to move him off the books. And if they could, then they would have kept Pozuelo. Pozuelo wanted DP money. Now, they couldn't. They couldn't move Pizzaro. They couldn't find anyone that wanted to take him for the amount that they wanted to sell him for. So Pozuelo could not come on board because Inter Miami's out of DP spots, like you mentioned earlier. Rodolfo Pizarro's a DP. Leonardo Campana is a young DP. They triggered the buy option from Wolverhampton. So he's a young DP. And then Gregore ended up being a designated player this season. Now, can they buy down his cap hit later on if someone wants to come from Argentina that has a World Cup trophy to his name? Oh, probably. But it didn't work out for Pozuelo. Pozuelo's a big loss. Gonzalo Higuain's a massive loss as well. He didn't have the best tenure in Inter Miami, but he finished on a very high note, a very strong note, scoring goals. Him and Pozuelo literally put this team on their backs and pushed this team to the playoffs last year. So those are the 2 biggest losses. Inter Miami has 3 DPs right now, so no room for Pozuelo there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Pizzaro, who made the start against Montreal, played 89 minutes in that game. And, I thought when you guys originally brought him to the club, he's not a 10. He's clearly not a 10, in my opinion. And to see him play as one of those 8s, the left side 8, I believe he played in that game against Montreal, I thought he looked promising. He had 3 chances created. I think he had a shot in that game. Always looked to go for it in that game, which is, again, promising signs. It's one game, week 1, like you mentioned. So, there's going to be hiccups along the way with players, just like all teams are going to have hiccups along the way. But from what we saw in week 1, I thought it was a lot better than the last time that we saw him in MLS.
Yeah, it was a solid start. Again, just nothing great, but nothing terrible. He had his moments. There's still the times where he, in my opinion, over dribbles. It takes too many touches on the ball. But again, solid start. I know some people were really impressed with his performance. I wouldn't say I was that impressed with his performance, but he was solid. I can't say he had a bad game. It was a good first game back, integrating himself into this new group and trying to figure out what his best position is. they played a 4-2-3-1. So, he was kind of an 8, kind of a winger, somewhere in between. In the diamond, he's supposed to be playing as an 8. So we'll see. I agree. I don't think 10 is his best spot. I think he's more of an 8. I think that probably is better suited for him, just because of, he's not necessarily the guy that's going to pull the strings at the 10. Can he create his own shot on his own? Not necessarily. He's got good technical abilities, but I think the 8 will suit him a little bit better. I know he's not the best defensively, but if you have him as an attack-minded 8, not quite a 10, not necessarily an 8, then that's probably where he's best at.
Like you said, only 1 year left on that contract, and for sure Miami's not going to re-sign him after this season.
Unless he scores like 15 goals and dishes out 10 assists, I don't think he'll be back in the Miami.
Yeah, and if that happens, then he's going to be in the running for MVP, which I do not see that happening. Sorry for all the people out there that are Pizzaro fans, which I'm sure there probably isn't many. After
my podcast mate thinks he's going to be in Miami. We did our preseason predictions last week, and she said Pizzaro is going to be Inter Miami's MVP for 2023, and I was like, it's
a hot take.
I mean, she has hot takes, and she's also clearly biased towards Pizzaro. But anyway,
we love it. But with all that said, though, we saw this team win 6 out of the last 10 games, make that push in the playoffs. Like I mentioned, 48 points. Is 48 points now the benchmark for this club? And I know MLS now put the playoffs to 9 teams in each conference, so it's a little bit easier to make the playoffs. But do you think really last season's team set the benchmark going forward to what Inter Miami should be all about?
I don't know if they set the benchmark, because Inter Miami wants to be better than that. They even have said that publicly. They want to be better than 6th place, which is what they finished last year. So if you want to say it's the benchmark because it's the highest they've ever finished, then sure. But I don't think that's their goals are higher. Their ambitions are higher. Now, they wanted to finish in the top 4 to make a home playoff, or to have a home playoff game. But now with the new setup, you don't need to finish in the top 4. So, as long as they make the playoffs, and then we'll see what the playoff run brings, then that will probably determine if the season is successful or not. If they don't make the playoffs, it's not a successful season, and then you've really got to analyze and assess a lot of things, including Phil Neville's future. He's been in charge for 2 years. This is his 3rd season. First year, they didn't make the playoffs with a team that was probably more talented than last year's. But then they brought in a whole bunch of new pieces, scraped a lot of pieces off the roster, brought in a lot of new blood, and then they made the playoffs over exceeded expectations. So, it's been one bad season, one good season. What does this season bring? I think that will be very determining in whether Phil Neville stays past 2023.
I mean, as Jim Curtin said a couple of weeks ago, with 62% of the league making the playoffs, I mean, if you don't make the playoffs, then there's a real argument that you should probably lose your job with 62% of the league making the playoffs. I mean, it's...
there's definitely no way to say you've had a good season if you haven't made the playoffs. Unless you're starting from scratch, like you've had a new coach and a complete new... I mean, even then, it's like, all right, because you're going to see teams that are under 500 make the playoffs.
Yeah, so. Easily. Easily. That's what MLS and Apple want, and that's what they get. And again, it's a conversation.
MLS loves that, man. MLS loves that, man, because they don't have promotion and relegation, and we don't have to dive into all that. But MLS clearly wants to keep fans invested into this regular season for as long as possible. Because if there's 6 teams that make the playoffs and you're in 9th place and you're not reaching that in the last 5 weeks, then what's your incentive to go to the stadium and watch the game besides just your love for the club? Which, I mean, some people will have, but, general public, will they have that? Probably not. They're not probably investing their money in a team that has no chance to make the playoffs during, 5-6 week stretch. So anyway.
Agreed. But let's go ahead and talk about this game on Saturday into Miami, Philadelphia Union. Like we mentioned a couple times about Leo Capana missing this game because of the calf injury. I asked Jim Curtin about that, if that changes the Union's plan against Miami on Saturday, and this was Jim's response.
Yeah, look, you never want players to go through injuries, especially very talented strikers like Campagna, who's still young, getting better and better. I know he'll have a big season for them, but certainly they'll miss him, which does play into our advantage. But again, you want the best players on the field at all times. So again, unfortunate there. But again, he'll get back, I'm sure, and he'll add to what is already a very difficult attack to deal with. They get real width from their outside backs. They're very brave going forward. And again, for me, the unsung heroes from last year, Gregore and Mota in the middle of the field, not just ball winning, but when they get a hold of the ball, their passing, their movement is really, really good, and they are kind of the anchor of that Miami team, and the reason that they've been successful.
I like how he said, really, really good. he didn't go over the wall there with his praise. He was kind of good.
Yeah, it wasn't the same praise that he gave Wilfred Nancy and the Columbus team after the game on Saturday. But I think Jim does have a fair point where Mota and Gregore, they were responsible last season for 21% of Miami's touches. Both midfielders look to keep the ball moving forward, and like Jim said, they're that anchor that's going to protect that back line for Inter Miami. What are your thoughts from hearing the high praise from Jim Curtin on those two players?
I don't know if I consider it high praise, but he gave them praise. I mean, it's rare you hear a coach in MLS not give praise. It's the comment that we heard recently from the anonymous executive in the Athletic was like, it's rare, right? So that's why it like catches so many eyeballs and draws so much attention, just because it's not normal. Look, Gregory's a good 6. He's a pit bull terrier in there. Likes contact, gets in tackles, has some range to him. Not the fastest, but he's got range. And Mota will take up positions. He'll put in the effort. Not the best defensive player, but he'll make do with what he's got. Obviously, more of an 8 there with he gives the team la salida. The build out from the back with his range of passes. Because he can hit a long ball, he can hit the short passes, he can combine. So they've got some quality there. Last year, the challenge was finding the best way to play them in that midfield. Last year we saw Jean Mota more often than not playing as the 6, like a deep lying playmaker, like a Andrea Pirlo type. And that meant Gregore, who would normally play the 6 in a natural defensive midfielder role, he was playing as more of an 8, more advanced further up the field, and that necessarily doesn't play to his strengths because he's not the cleanest technically, despite his Brazilian pedigree. So, that's always been the trick. And then again in week 1, solid outings. Phil Neville said he thought Gregore was the best player, which I'm not sure I agree with that, especially when you see the save straight calendar had to make. But nonetheless, solid week 1. I think they'll have their work cut out for them against Philadelphia.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll get into that, right? With the Champions League on Tuesday and then Chicago Fire next Saturday. So, I mean, Jim Curtin admitted that, look, there's going to be rotation in these 3 games, saying, first and foremost, the priority is Miami. We do have a plan in place, though, and really trust our roster, I believe, very much in all the players we have. And he said, we heard it, the priority is Miami. And they're going to need the full roster, all 27 of those players. I mean,
Coach
Andre, yeah, for sure. Andre Blake's.
It sounds like they're going to rotate.
That does not change.
But it sounds like they're going to rotate players for Miami, right?
Yeah, for sure.
They're going into CONCACAF Champions League.
And that's your you can say Miami's the priority, right? We all know CONCACAF Champions League is
international competition. It's Philadelphia Union's chance to do what Seattle did and get to the Club World Cup. I mean,
you don't have 34 games.
That opportunity, exactly. That opportunity doesn't come around too often. So if you got to prioritize one or the other, or a road game, yes, it is against an Eastern Conference opponent, but it's week 2 of the regular season. You're on the road. I mean, I'm putting my eggs in the basket of the CONCACAF Champions League if I'm Jim Curtin. And I fully expect him to do that based on, if you read between the lines, what he's saying there, that you won't see a full-strength Philadelphia Union, which helps Inter Miami. That'll help Inter Miami's chances of winning this one. And if they do, then, kudos to Inter Miami. But if if they beat a Philadelphia Union team that's not at full strength, then can't really say it's a statement way in here or there. So we'll see what, how much rotation there is. Probably about half the lineups usually standard, but maybe Jim Curtin goes heavy. I don't know. We'll see.
If Miami does beat a rotated Philadelphia Union side, there's going to be headlines wrote about, this was a statement win for Phil Neville and Inter Miami, for people that didn't pay attention to what happened.
That's why you need context. You need context. That's why you have to provide as media members the proper context, and that's why people watching have to also understand. Look, this is not a full strength Philadelphia Union team. If that's what happens, on Saturday, which I would assume is the case. Because,
I agree as well. I think Philadelphia Union were messing with a 3-5-2 formation a lot in preseason. Jim Curtin talked plenty of that formation in the offseason, saying that they want to play with 3 center backs. And so I do think that we will see 3 center backs against Miami this weekend. I do think Damian Lowe's going to get his first start of the season. I think Jack Elliott's going to also be in that formation with Brendan Craig, who he probably won't play, but if I was Jim Curtin, I'd play him. He's never started an MLS game, only played 1 game in his career in MLS. He's a 18-year-old center back. Is a high prospect with youth national team. But I think they go with 3 in the back. McGlynn and Martinez as your 2 holding 6s with your wingbacks and Wagner and Pizzaro. I know some people are like, oh, Nate Harriel will start over Pizzaro, but Nate's more of a defending right back than Pizzaro is. And so if you're going to go with 3-5-2, you want attacking outside backs, and Pizzaro fits that bill. And then you would play Ua and Carranza. And then around the 65th minute, I think we'd see a whole bunch of players come off the field just to keep the other starters that are starting the game on the bench, keep them fit for the game against Alianza on Tuesday. And then those guys that played 65 minutes, you want to make sure they're healthy for that game on Tuesday. So, I could be off on my lineup, but that's what I would do if I'm Jim Curtin, and I fully expect the Union to rotate their squad. But I guess the question is, what do you expect Miami to do? You talked about them wanting to play the diamond, but we know Campana is not playing in this game, so do they go back with a 4-2-3-1?
So Phil Neville today spoke to the media, and he said it's going to be a battle of the diamonds. I don't know if how much you should read into that. Because Inter Miami last week, when they lost Campana on Thursday, despite practicing all week to be in a diamond, they switched the formation, right? Like the easiest thing, right, from a soccer standpoint, from a football standpoint, would have been, all right, Campana's out injured, but we've trained all week in this formation. Let's bring somebody else in. Yes, maybe that player can't bring you or provide you the exact same things that Campana brings you in terms of the quality and characteristics and the roles and responsibilities up top. But that would make the most sense in terms of what you've rehearsed all week. But they didn't. They went away from that. So to me, if you don't have Campana, and on short notice after practicing a whole week in a system, are you going to go back to that system? Yes, you have a whole week now to train with with the said player, if that's the way you want to go. But I don't know if I buy it. Because I think they would have stuck with it last week otherwise. And the fact that they didn't, to me, says maybe they don't. Maybe Campana is so important for that system that if you don't have him, then you've got to switch it up and you've got to mix it up. So I could see Inter Miami going 4-2-3-1, despite what Phil Neville said. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does come out in a 4-4-2. Who would be Josef Martinez's partner there? Is it Ariel Lassiter? Is it Schneider Borgelin, who scored in his MLS debut last week? I mean, there's some options there. But again, if you ask me, and I'm not a betting man, but if you ask me, I think Inter Miami won't come out in a 4-4-2.
And I could be wrong. The Union play their 4-4-2 diamond, but I don't know. I don't see it. I really do have a hard time believing that. But I guess we'll see Saturday. 2 more for you, Franco, and then I'll let you go. I think we could probably both agree that this will be a low-scoring game. When you look at the series, the last 2 years, they've been competitive. I mean, we've had 2-1 games. I think we had a 1-1 and then a 0-0 game. So I'd be shocked if the Union come in and put up 4+ goals against Miami, just like I'd be shocked if Miami put up 4+ goals against the Union. So, I mean, whatever formation these teams come out in, safe to say it's going to be low scoring?
It's a good question. It just depends. Depends what we see from Philadelphia, and it depends what we see from Inter Miami. Week 2, under other circumstances, you'd see close to strongest lineups here. Inter Miami's already got an important injury. Philadelphia's got a CONCACAF Champions League game to plan for. So there's a lot more unknowns here. So I could see a blowout. I could see a blowout, going either way if certain things pan out. Inter Miami scores early and Philadelphia has to come out, and they don't have the strongest team. I could see Inter Miami scoring a few. I could see it going the other way where Philadelphia just, overwhelms Inter Miami, especially in terms of the press and not allowing Inter Miami to build out if that's what Inter Miami looks to do. I don't necessarily think that that's what they're going to try to do. They do want to be a possession-based team this year, a more possession-based team this year, especially in that 4-4-2 diamond. But again, if they don't have Campana and they can't play that 4-4-2 diamond, then maybe, in this game they'll be maybe a little bit more 2022 version, or at least early 2022 version, where they look to be more of a counter-attacking team with speed down the wing. So it's tough to say. This is a hard one to really analyze and dissect. I'd say we'll see some goals. We can see a few goals. I don't know. Maybe we'll see 4 goals combined between the two teams. I don't know if that considers low score. I don't know if you consider that low scoring. I don't think that's low scoring.
I don't think so either.
It could be 3-1. It could be 2-2. And then
not
it's not necessarily a blow. It's not a blowout.
Yeah.
It's also not low scoring.
Yeah. Okay. I can take that for sure. I don't like giving predictions on the show of a scoreline and everything, so I'm not going to ask you for that. I agree. I think we'll see goals, but I don't know if we'll see a ton of goals. But the last thing, people always joke about how Philadelphia Union fleeced Miami for Julian Carranza, and I'm not sure that's really the case, because Miami, they still get a sell-on clause in the deal with the Union, and if the Union sell Julian Carranza, which it's not if, it's when. Jim Curtin said as much this week and after the game in Columbus that they're already getting offers for Carranza, and we'll see if they get an offer that's good enough. Will they accept it come summertime? It's possible, right? Jim Curtin says he hopes that they have a full season with Julian Carranza because, if he keeps playing like he did against Columbus with those 2 goals, offers are going to come fast in the summertime, and Jim said they're already coming. So we'll see what the Union do with those offers. But, it's funny that, like I said, people say, "Oh, the Union fleeced Miami," but I don't look at it that way, because credit has to go to Miami for for scouting Julian Carranza, and I don't think that gets talked about enough by people in the media, by fans on social media. They just laugh at the deal. Oh, the Union got this guy that scored 14 goals last season for them. How could Miami let a player like that go? No, I just don't think Julian Carranza fit in that system in Miami, where it was a dumpster fire when he was there. I think Higuain took a spot off of Carranza where he didn't really. They want that 1-2 punch like we see him and Mikhail Uhre in Philadelphia, and so I just don't think that the situation Julian was in was a good one for him, like it is in Philadelphia. But then you look at what Phil Neville's been able to do into Miami. Do you think what we're getting out of Julian Carranza in Philadelphia? Do you think Phil Neville would get the same productivity out of Julian if he would have stayed in Miami?
No, I don't think so. And again, that's why I think this is a big year for Phil Neville, because last year, until Pozuelo arrived, and obviously Pozuelo has just talent on his own, and I'm not saying, Phil Neville didn't do some good things to help also adjust the team and better play to the team's strengths and become more attack-minded. But before that, the team wasn't looking particularly good. And even towards the end, they made the playoffs off of grit, desire, resilience. They won a lot of games late last year. It wasn't like they overwhelmed teams with their soccer or their football and played really well and beat opponents in a convincing fashion, or took a 2-0 lead and put the opponent away. The only game that they did that in was the penultimate game of the season, where they played Orlando City and they scored early. And they won that game, if I'm not mistaken, 4-1. That was the only game in which, from start to finish, they were the better team and they were deserved winners. Every other game, especially during that not every other game, most of the other games during that second half of the season, when they started winning, a lot of them came with late goals from Higuain. It was just pure heart, pure fight, pure hustle, pure just, we're not giving up, which absolutely, that is a great quality to have, and something that is commendable, and something that the team deserves its plaudits for, as well as Phil Neville, that a team can adopt that characteristic. But if that's your only way to win games, then you're a one-trick pony. And then when you have higher level opponents, it's going to be pretty tough. Like we saw in the playoffs, they played New York City FC, and in New York City FC was the better team from start to finish, and they ended up winning that game, if I'm not mistaken, 3-0. So, Inter Miami, from a soccer standpoint, needs to be better. Phil Neville needs to show that he can get more out of his players. There's questions as to if he plays players in their strongest positions, if he tinkers a little bit too much, if he plays players out of their best positions. I mentioned Mota playing the 6 and Gregore playing the 8. So things like that. There are questions about that. Phil Neville this year not only needs to try to make the playoffs, although there's more teams now, but I think he also needs to show that he can get more out of a team from a soccer standpoint, that they can win games but win a few more games in a more convincing manner, like they did against Orlando City, where they were the better team from start to finish. And that's a long-winded response to saying, with Julian Carranza, I just don't think, based on what we've seen to this point with Inter Miami, that the soccer would have been good enough to help him flourish and produce like he's producing in Philadelphia. I think it would have still been a lot on his shoulders to figure it out and to come up with solutions on his own, which maybe he can do, but it's also better if you're a striker if you have people feeding you and nourishing you there in the final third. So I don't think it would have worked here. I think it's they needed to part ways. Higuain was still in the picture. Carranza wasn't really doing much here. So probably a good deal for both. Philadelphia's benefiting from it. Inter Miami went with Leonardo Campana, who, injuries aside, has been promising so far in a year and change. So I think they both made out positively, and the storylines will be there, but overall, better for them to have split and gone their separate ways.
It's okay. And once it gets sold, Miami will have more money coming their way. And then once Messi comes to the club, that fixes all the problems, right?
I don't know if even Messi's arrival will fix everything, but it'll certainly help if that happens.
For sure. Well, Franco, it's been a blast having you on the podcast. And for people that want to check out the podcast, people that want to check out your writing, where can people find all that information?
Yeah, so you can go on Twitter at Franco Panizo, FrancoPanizo. My writing is on MiamiTotalFootball.substack.com. That's free, won't charge ever. So if you want Inter Miami news, I break news on a regular basis as well. Not to the team's liking, but I do nonetheless. So you can check that out there. The YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, all Miami Total Football, and that's football spelled in Spanish style, FUTBOL. And then the podcast, of course, you can find on all your favorite podcast networks. And that goes by the name of Miami Total Football Radio, because we have to roll our R's here in South Florida. That's why I named it what I named it, because I was like, I need something that you can say in both languages, right? Like Miami Total Football, and then in Spanish, Miami Total Football, and then for the podcast, I decided Radio. So there you go. You can check it out. If you want to follow Inter Miami up to date on a regular basis, or maybe just for this week ahead of the game against the Philadelphia Union, check out all those different channels, all those different social media networks. And again, Swiss Army knife, brother, Swiss Army knife.
Yes, sir. Franco's the guy. So be sure you check out his work. And it's not often you see people that let you read their stuff on Substack for free. So shout out to you for doing that and giving.
I mean, if nobody reads it, then what are you writing for? I mean, I get it. Listen, you got to make a living. I get it, like 100%. But I'm an old school throwback in that way, and I don't think people will in abundance pay to read something, especially MLS, which is, again, niche. So my thought is, make it free. Let people read it, because people want to consume the information, and people probably aren't going to pay. They got to pay for Netflix. They got to pay for
Apple
Disney.
TV.
They got to pay for Apple TV now. There's enough things. They got to pay for their PlayStation Network account. Your wife. There's so many things to pay for. I get it 100%, and I don't begrudge anyone that charges on their Substack. That's just my approach.
Well, you're the guy. Thanks so much, Franco. But let's go ahead and talk about keys to the game quickly. Number one, you got to be aware of the counterattacks of Miami. Last season, Miami was tied for the most counterattack goals in the league with 6. They have good outside backs that really stretch the width of the pitch, just like Jim Curtin said. I think Lassiter, even though he's not a fullback, he's a forward, I know. I think he's going to be a handful to deal with in this game with his pace. He's going to look to spring onto those counterattacks by Miami. And so it's important, if the Union do play with 2 6s, like I'm predicting, that they protect that back line, that they're aware of the counterattack threat that Miami poses. Number 2, set pieces are going to be key in this game. We saw Miami give up a set piece goal against Montreal last Saturday, but it was ruled out for offsides. We saw Miami's first goal was a set piece goal. The Union, as we all know, is one of the best teams on set pieces last year, where they scored 12 goals in the league. We saw them score 1 last season against Miami with Corey Burke heading in a Kai Wagner free kick. And so I fully expect set pieces to be a huge part of this game Saturday night. And number 3, intensity. Why do I say intensity? Because last year, we all know, the Philadelphia Union went 7-5-5 on the road. That was the most wins on the road in a single season. And the Union scored the first goal on the road in 53% of their matches. And when they did that, the Union went 6-2-1. And so I want to see the Union just continue to play like they did last year on the road. Don't be afraid. keep going at teams, just like we saw last year. And if we do, I think the Union could be in for all 3 points against Miami. I'm not sure that's really the case with the rotation that I'm expecting, but I think we'll get an entertaining game. I don't think it's going to be high scoring, like I said, but I think it's going to be enjoyable for Union fans because we'll see a lot of players, I hope, making their starting debuts for the Union. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcasts, The Free Kick, and check out the website, thefreekick.net. I'll be sure to have a match preview up on the website. It's going to be pretty much everything you guys heard today on the podcast. So if you guys check it out, great. If you guys don't, then so be it. But again, thank you so much to Franco for coming onto the podcast. Be sure to check out all his work. All of his info will be in the show notes if you guys want to follow him on social media, if you guys want to listen to the podcast and read his writing. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.